Alrighty folks, it is time for another bit of 40k rantage, and today it is a regretful one by a pal, Northern Exile, because today we're talking about the Ultramarines and why I was kind of wrong about them. Years and years and years ago, I was still in America, and I was feeling pretty lonely over there, which is why I stuck to the name Northern Exile when I was going to change it, but I kind of stuck with it. And the video that I made when I was in America, when I was getting back into the hobby, during 8th edition, was about the Ultramarines and why they were boring and why I kind of really didn't like them as a faction at the time. But the more I've read over the years, the more a begrudging respect has come into my mind about the Ultramarines until today, the sea change kind of hit critical mass, and now I really like the Ultramarines. Like, it's kind of... I've been rereading a few books. I've been rereading Dark Imperium, actually, over the past couple of days. And, I think it's a really good book. And I wanted to talk about it, at least in part today, as we discuss why I was wrong about the Ultramarines. This won't be a hugely long video. It's more me getting my thoughts out there, because they've been going around in my brain for a while. And the more I see of people, like, blindly having a go at Ultramarines, kind of drags me a little bit, kind of makes me go, okay, have you read anything? 40k is one of those really weird hobbies where people have a lot of opinions about 40k lore that isn't actually backed up by the lore. They've watched text-to-speech device or heard someone else's opinions, and they parrot those opinions as if they're fact. They parrot things that they've seen on text-to-speech device as if they are indeed fact. Or they've read something on Reddit that somebody said that they thought was humorous, and so they regurgitate it as if, again, it was fact, when it isn't, right? Channels like Lewittin do a really good job of actually doing the reading and actually having a little look at what's out there, and wouldn't you know it, Lewittin is a big Ultramarines fan. Go figure. A very well-read person in the hobby sphere who knows what they're talking about with the lore likes his Ultramarines. It is very frustrating, especially as a Grey Knight fan as well, hearing what other people seem to think about that faction when they've clearly not read a damn thing in their life about that faction beyond Reddit or watching Caldor Drago be on drugs in text-to-speech device. Do you know what I mean? So we're moving on with that premise in mind. The Ultramarines are one of the most hated factions in Warhammer 40,000. I don't think that's controversial to say. I will readily admit that I was one of the people who tended to look down on the Ultramarines for what Games Workshop did to them, namely, insisting that the Ultramarines were the Space Marines. Even companies wishing to work with Games Workshop with a Space Marine in their games had to use Ultramarines until Rogue Trader, with that idiot Space Wolf, of course. And then we had an immediate course correct with Space Marine 2, straight afterwards, right? I know for a fact that if a company comes to Games Workshop and wants to do a video game or board game or whatever it is on Space Marines, one of the main demands is they need to be an Ultramarine, or if it's not a very big game, they don't care. But if it is going to be a big game by a big company, they need to be Ultramarines or it's a no-go. It is no surprise that all of the Amazon stuff has been Ultramarines all the way along, right? And it will remain so as well. They just couldn't let Titus go, could they? His story occurred 200 plus years ago in the current setting. It would have been so easy to give us Space Marine 2 against Tyranids and Khorne Demons on Baal Secundus as the Blood Angels, or even as the Carcharodons searching for weapons and war materiel in the Void. Instead, we got safe, we got neutral, we got honourable battle brothers, we got Ultramarines and Captain Titus, and it's still, as a 40k fan, a pretty good game. The problem with this is, if you're not a 40k fan, the story of Space Marine 2 sucks. It's awful. It's really bad, right? I can feel my bile rising already. This is supposed to be a positive video. You see, the reason I'm making this video is because I believe the Ultramarines are not the best Space Marine chapter. They are thrust into the limelight through circumstances, and a lot of the time, they do actually lose. Let's look at some of the main reasons Ultramarines are hated and see if they actually hold any weight. The first one being, the Ultramarines take over stories they have no right to. Okay, I will be honest, I've not seen much evidence of this. During the Horus Heresy, there are side players. They are side players in the Horus Heresy, right? They're not the main legion in the Horus Heresy. But and they have some of the weaker novels in that series too. Aside from when they fight word bearers, those are badass, right? But they stick to their lane. They don't get involved in other people's shtick during Horus Heresy, unlike Space Wolves. I often think the Ultramarines get an unfair shake and are labelled with things that the Space Wolves seem to just get away with and skate on past. Not once do we see the Ultramarines just annihilating another legion without any effort in the Horus Heresy. Not once do they make decisions that put the entire Imperium at risk from their own arrogance during Horus Heresy. Even Imperium Secundus is a sound tactical decision, and as soon as Guilliman is told the Emperor yet lives, he scraps the entire thing and risks everything in a desperate bid to reach Terra. He is a really good leader. As soon as he gets information that conflicts with the information that he's got and proves him wrong, he immediately course corrects. Another situation that is brought up is the devastation of Baal, right? The Ultramarines turn up at the end to relieve the Blood Angels against the Tyranids. I used to really hate this decision because I thought, mistakenly, that, maybe, just maybe, we may be getting, the main man back. We may be getting Sanguinius coming back and being a part of the factions going forwards. Now, that would have been a bad narrative choice, okay? Don't get me wrong. Do not bring Sanguinius back. That would be silly, and it would cheapen everything that he did in Horus Heresy. But I thought maybe they're going balls out. But no, Guilliman turns up and everything is secured yet again. I used to really hate this decision, and I saw it as Games Workshop taking away the win of the Blood Angels and giving it to the Ultramarines, right? Even Games Workshop knows how overbearing their love of Rabute Guilliman is. Or was, right? I've often told this story of us being in a meeting in a hotel during a trade event where all of the managers are there being trained and doing different things. And we are given a magazine to read over as groups, right? As a big old, huge room of managers split into 5 manager groups, and we're there going over this magazine that's going to come out towards Christmas about what's in Warhammer 40k, what things we're pushing over the Christmas period, that kind of thing. And this is around 2017, right? So we're there just looking over it. And we've got to pick things out. We've got to write things down, things that we've noticed. The first thing that somebody noticed, a veteran on the other side of the hall noticed when he's asked, is Rabute Guilliman is mentioned 217 times in a 40-page booklet. Do you know what I mean? A 40-page booklet that's supposed to cover the entire setting. And this guy liked Ultramarines, and he was like, guys, you're killing us. You're killing us. Everyone's going to hate them. Because you just ram them down our throats. We don't get a choice in the matter. You don't just show us cool Ultramarines and say, which ones do you like, guys? Alright, collect that army. It's literally Ultramarines, 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 Ultramarines. That's Games Workshop's fault, and I've said this many, many, many times. The thing is, from a story standpoint, the devastation of Baal, it does make sense. The Blood Angels were not facing a tendril of Leviathan. We're told they are facing its major component parts, or at least those that have appeared thus far in the galaxy. Guilliman arriving allows him to take stock of the situation in Imperium Nihilus. It allows Dante's story to move on as he becomes Lord Commander of that part of the galaxy, and creates a clear separation between Imperium Sanctus and Nihilus. In fact, them not doing something like this with Lionel Johnson means that his entire story is null and void. Lionel Johnson has come back and done nothing since he's come back. Guilliman has been racing around, actually taking stock. Even if he doesn't do anything, Guilliman turns up to look at something, because now he can say, okay, I know what's going on in Imperium Nihilus. This makes sense. Dante, why don't you take the lead here, my son? Why don't you go over there and as my nephew, and you take control of this entire place? Because that's the most logical thing to do, right? And then he leaves, because he knows, Games Workshop know, at least they should, that Imperium Nihilus is not Guilliman's playground. He should be holding Imperium Sanctus, right? The lower half of the Imperium that's still got the Astronomicon in it. But the Lion coming back shows you what happens to a narrative when you bring a Primarch back and do nothing with him. It stalls, it stagnates, and it becomes laughable very, very, very quickly. Lionel Johnson is now an afterthought in 40k. Tell me when I'm telling lies, right? So, that is where we are with that, right? I don't think the Ultramarines turn up and steal the limelight from anybody. I just don't, right? The one situation where you could have really argued that was the Blood Angels, and even then, it kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense. So Games Workshop, this is something that I do back people up on, right? Games Workshop just cannot seem to get over the Ultramarines. This is the one thing I agree with in this video. From the old codexes of Matt Ward to how the Ultramarines have been treated since the creation of the Great Rift in 8th edition, Games Workshop are to Ultramarines what Vince McMahon was to Roman Reigns. Wrestling fans, you will know what I'm talking about, as I always say, you will be sitting there nodding along with that statement, right? Because what did he do? Right? Everybody told the WWE back in the day that they weren't really interested in Roman Reigns being a good guy. He was kind of lame. But no, WWE told you, no, Roman Reigns is cool. You like Roman Reigns. And for the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to ram this guy down your throat. And the more you boo, the more he will win. The more you don't like it, the more we will push him. Until you stop coming to the shows. And then the pandemic happens. And they're forced to reset. Vince leaves the company. And Roman Reigns, lo and behold, is a bad guy. And what happens when Roman Reigns becomes a bad guy? He becomes the biggest star in the last decade or two of professional wrestling, right? Because they listened to the fans for once and, you know, they made bank off of Roman Reigns. And congratulations to him. I think even he has said that when they were pushing him, he was saying, guys, are you sure they hate me? Like, why are you doing this? And I'm sure if Rabute Gilliman was a real person, he'd be saying the same thing to Games Workshop. He'd be saying, guys, write about someone else. These guys hate me. Will you just get off your horse? Will you stop talking about Ultramarine for 10 seconds and let somebody else have a box set? Let somebody else have the limelight. That's not the Space Wolves, right? Somebody else, right? There's only one thing worse than Ultramarines like this, and it is the Space Wolves. Because whenever the Space Wolves come along, they're not as thrown in your face as the Ultramarines are, but by God, their power levels are ridiculous, and Games Workshop seem to love just jerking them off at any opportunity that they can. No, somebody else, please. I don't care whether it's Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Mortificators, I don't care. Somebody else that other than Ultramarines. And do you know what? Do you know why I know this is what Gilliman would say? Because every single Ultramarines fan that I know goes, for God's sake, I love my guys, but give us a break. Put us on the bench, guys. Other people can play, right? We've got so many novels, so many campaign books, so many models that we can enjoy, so many video games. You can leave us on the shelf for a year, 2, 3, maybe even 5 years. Don't really cover what we're doing. Show us what else is going on in the galaxy. Because, you know, some Ultramarines players might want to play another army every once in a while, right? You're not going to lose your Ultramarines fans by just letting them sit on the bench for a year or 2. It does not matter if you tell Games Workshop you are sick of the Ultramarines. It does not matter how many times you roll out your eyes when you see them. These are the guys. In their opinion. Like it or leave and do something else. Games Workshop very rarely gives any screen time to other chapters, and even if they do, they are either small series of books away from the main plot that aren't very important, or they are single novels like The Devastation of Baal that do a lot for that chapter in question, but nothing for the overall mythos of that chapter or part of the galaxy. You never see anything but Ultramarines in big productions like Amazon TV shows, video games, and the like, and if you do, they are smaller side projects or little glimpses. Essentially, easily ignored and forgotten. Ultramarines are Space Marines to Games Workshop. Everybody else is just there. The thing is, as I've just said, this is not the fault of the army itself. I bet a lot of you think that Ultramarines are actually cool. If you take a step back and examine them in the lore black and white, you will realise the Ultramarines do lose. A lot. They are the most susceptible chapter and bloodline for chaos, which is weird. But thanks to their sheer numbers, the vast majority of traitor and renegade chapters against the Imperium, who were once loyalists, are of Ultramarine gene stock. The lore is over Ultramarines. The company Games Workshop may never be. Ultramarines and Gilliman are extremely relatable. At least to me, they are extremely relatable. They are probably the most stoically normal of the Space Marine chapters. Sure, their sense of humour is dulled by their training and indoctrination, but it is still there. They sacrifice their egos for the mission, getting things done in a tactical and surgical manner, unless you're Kato Sicarius or somebody like that. And when they're funny, they are funny. There was one point in when they're fighting the word bearers in one of the Horus Heresy books where they're in space, and obviously their main line is we march from a crag, right? We march from a crag, strength and honor. We march from a crag, and all that kind of thing. And they're standing there in this spaceship, about to go outside and float around and do some fighting in space with the word bearers. One Ultramarine looks to another and goes, nods to him and says, "We float from a crag," and then just floats away. Dude, that's funny. Like, I'm sorry, that's a dad joke. The guy's done a dad joke in the middle of a war, and it's the most Ultramarine. There's nothing funnier than somebody who's like nearly like, a bit out there, saying something funny without realizing it's funny, and then just getting on with their day, right? I remember I've said this before as well. My friend Matt, he came in once, and he's in university. He comes into the canteen and he's like, "Boys, I'm very upset." I'm like, "Oh, Jesus. Right, Matt, what's going on, dude?" He goes, "I have just been to the poster shop. Yeah. And I love me some Where's Wally, boys." "Okay, you like Where's Wally? Great. I've got a lovely Where's Wally poster. I brought it home, and I couldn't find it. It went missing. I couldn't find it." And we're all sitting there giggling, because obviously, Where's Wally? We're thinking it's a joke. And he goes, "I don't think it's very funny. Like, I'm really annoyed." And that just made us laugh even more. Do you know? That's an Ultramarine. That was so funny, and he didn't realize why it was funny. When he explained it to him, he was like, "Oh yeah, okay, because he does not he does nowadays. But back then, he didn't quite fire off like a normal human in social interactions." But dude, that's the Ultramarines. That's them. We float from a crag, and off he goes, floating away. That's really funny. And there's another one by Aenid Thule, right? Being alone. So Aenid Thule, if you know who he is the Ultramarine who basically theorized in theoreticals, right? In training theoreticals, about how to defeat other Space Marines. And of course, this is before the Horus Heresy. That was extremely controversial. And he's been reprimanded by everybody in the Ultramarines, so much so that he's sent to Guilliman, right? To be told off, for a full rebuke by the Primarch himself. So he's standing alone in Guilliman's private chambers, waiting to be told off, and thinks to himself, "You know what? Fuck it. I can't be in any more trouble than I already am. I'm doing it," right? And he proceeds to rummage through Guilliman's priceless sword collection and starts practicing with them with sound effects. Like, I love this guy, right? This is how cool the Ultramarines are. When they stand out, they really stand out. And there's some really funny people in the Ultramarines. Like, Aenid's just a chill guy. He's like, I can't get into any more trouble than this. I'm already going to get rebuked. I may as well. Do you know what? I'm doing it. I'm doing it. He opens up the armory, goes, "Oh, these are cool," and starts playing with them, like in Guilliman's private chambers. It's like, the hell? Anyway, little moments like this are sprinkled throughout the lore of the Ultramarines, and it was actually one of the things I think Space Marine 2 got wrong. Space Marine 2 focuses on the Games Workshop approved version of the Ultramarines. Ultra stoic, ultra honourable battle brother, ultra by the book, ultra fucking boring. It has great moments, sure, but when fans point to how boring the Ultramarines are, they will point to how they act in this game as a prime example. Ultramarines are not boring. They are what an actual organised army looks like if they consist of Space Marines. They are stoic, sure, but stoic in the way that the Dalai Lama is still a chill guy who likes to throw snowballs at people when he's bored in the mountains. He is also stoic, right? You know what I'm saying? They are actually lovable. They constantly use dad jokes whenever the moment comes for levity, and they do lose. Guilliman being beaten by Fulgrim, when he has his throat cut, is low-key the biggest L any of the Primarchs ever take. And I include Ferrus Manus in that. Let me expand. Before you jump down my throat, let me expand. Right? Guilliman has a larger fleet. He has more Marines. He has all of the advantages, and he is still outthought and outmaneuvered by Fulgrim, who then laughs at him, slaughters his men, and kills him. And by the way, this is shown from the Ultramarines' perspective, and even from their perspective, they're saying, yeah, we got our asses handed to us. Like, they're not ashamed of it. They own it. They go, dude, that was a battering. Like, you know, and Gilliman's in his own mind is going, wow, yeah, I just took a bee sting there. I'm going to die. Like, I'm going to die. Like, Fulgrim has beaten me, right? The Emperor's children have beaten me. I'm done. I'm dead. We're all dead. This is my fault. The Ultramarines see this as a devastating defeat, and Gilliman thinks that his dying means the glue that holds the Imperium together is now gone. You can say that's arrogance, but I think he's right. The rest of his brothers after the Horus Heresy are either too willful, like the useless Leman Russ, or too headstrong Khan. They're angry and regretful, like Dawn, or just fucking gone, like the Lion or Corvus Corax. Gilliman being knocked out of the fight is what gives birth to the grim dark future of the 41st millennium, not the Horus Heresy. Controversial take, I know, but that's what I believe. Right? We are told point blank that the Imperium, the Emperor's dream, had a chance with Gilliman alive to wrangle his brothers together. A slight chance. It would have been a diminished Imperium, but it still would have been resembling what the Emperor wanted, right? Without Gilliman, the last link to this glorious past is cut, and we descend into the darkness of what we're seeing now. And it's glorious, right? Imagine having all of that, though, on your shoulders. Imagine waking up and seeing the empire that your father built is now in tatters. And not only that, it's warped into this really nasty, really grim, dark, really overly dogmatic system that oppresses people across the galaxy. The opposite of what the Emperor wanted. And you know for certain that if you hadn't have made that mistake, if you hadn't have just died for 10,000 years or so, all of this could have been avoided. Yeah. Imagine having all of that on your shoulders as a man and as a Space Marine chapter, and still knowing you have to just suck it up and get on with it. Why? Because people need you. I don't know about you, but that is to me what a hero looks like. This was all your fault. But unlike the cowardly Leman Russ, Gilliman doesn't hide from it. He fronts up. He stands up and tries to make it right, goddammit. In doing so, he does something ridiculous for Warhammer 40,000. He teaches you how to be a grown-ass man about your mistakes in life. Literally. Right? And the Ultramarines do have flaws. They can be social climbers. They can be very bureaucratic and try and undermine each other to get higher up in the Ultramarines. And that's shown too. They're not without their flaws. Right? This is also far from the only loss the Ultramarines take. Sure, they win a lot, but they are also losing a lot because of their sheer numbers. Their successor chapters wink in and out of existence all of the time, battered by constant warfare, and the main chapter constantly takes massive scars and losses from the Tyranids, Necrons, Emperor's Children, and even the Death Guard, because Gilliman died again! He lost again, right? He goes up against Mortarion and gets his cheeks clapped. Only the Emperor stepping in saves his ass, and he admits it too. He doesn't stand there and say, I am the Emperor's. No. He's like, hey, without the intervention from Dad, I'd be dead. I'm a moron. I shouldn't have done that, right? They're human, dude. They stand, sure. They survive, sure. But they don't just sweep people aside. They lose folks. Admittedly, these are never named characters in the 40k game. They never lose those. But we aren't talking about the game. We are talking about how they are presented in the lore. I would argue that the wins and losses column for the Ultramarines is a lot more even than you've been led to believe by the internet, Reddit, and channels like Brother Alpha Booster and people like that. I'd have you believe it's a lot more even than that. Do some reading. Read some books. Alright? Get immersed in the lore and you will see. The Ultramarines are extremely diverse, not in that way, in what you can do with them. some of the most savage chapters of the setting are Ultramarine successor chapters. Forces like the Mortificators, who are absolutely mental and rumoured to eat their captives and opponents, and the Doom Eagles, who are so obsessed with death and carnage, they go as far as to hold funerals for their recruits before they join, the ones who survive beating each other to death in Mortal Kombat-like tournaments anyway, before they even get to become Ultramarines. Ultramarine successors do not act like Ultramarines, although many do. There is a huge tapestry of different cultures and outlooks in their rogues gallery of chapters. The Ultramarines are a lot stronger here than other legions with large successor bases, like the Blood Angels, whose successors are essentially slightly different flavours of the Blood Angels, right? I've said this before and I'll say it again. In terms of, successor chapters, the one bad thing about the Devastation of Baal is that the Ultramarine successor chapter, the Blood Angels successor chapters are literally shown as Blood Angels Diet or Blood Angels Zero, right? One of my favourite ever chapters, the Angels Revenant, who fought Necrons for so long in a lava-filled world that everybody thought they were dead, and then thousands of years later, Explorator fleets from the Indomitus Crusade go near it, they hear fighting, and they're still fighting down there, right? They should have been dead by the lava. They're still fighting the Necrons down there. After thousands of years. Dude, these are beasts. The Angels Revenant are one of my favourite chapters, and they are actually an Ultramarine successor chapter, but they don't act anything like them. Right? If you want your chapter to have every option on the table in terms of narrative choices, if you're making your own one, make them Ultramarines. The fact that Games Workshop sidestepped this detail for the constant tide of balloon gold is rather depressing. And any Ultramarines fan will tell you the same thing. It's extremely depressing. There are so many other types of Ultramarines out there that they could cover, but they don't. We have not had an Iron Snakes novel or a novel like it for decades now. That's because Games Workshop are fucking lazy. They're chasing the Amazon crowd, they're chasing the normie crowd, and they want Ultramarines to be the Space Marines. If you're a Blood Angels fan, you're a Dark Angels fan, they don't want you here. They don't. And we'll get into that in our next 40k rant. Games Workshop not wanting you here as a fan. Because they're changing. The entire fan base is being swapped out for another fan base. We'll get into that next time. But for now, this is why I think I was wrong about the Ultramarines, and why I think you're probably wrong about them too. They're awesome, you deserve to collect them, and they deserve better than what Games Workshop choose to give them. I love you a long time. I'll speak to you tomorrow for some more hobby nightmares. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Have a good one. Bye now.